Hey, all you cool cats and kittens, it's your favorite history teacher back at you again with another historical video. And today we're going to be talking about a certain gender that reinvented itself or gained new independence through this 20s movement. We are talking about women. So let's get started. Okay, the 20s woman, module 8, lesson 4. We are zooming through the 20s. We are zooming through. That's your warm up. Objectives: we're going to distinguish how the flapper embodied the changing attitudes of many young women, assess how women's freedoms were still limited, describe the forms of inequalities and discrimination women received in the professional world, and explain the roles of explain how the roles of family life changed during the 20s. All right. The Devil Wears Prada. So by the 1920s, the experiences from World War I, the pull of the cities, and the changing attitudes had opened up a new world for many young Americans. In the rebellious, pleasure-loving atmosphere of the 1920s, that should say 19. Hold up. There we go. 1920s, many women began to assert their independence, reject the values of the 19th century, and demand the same freedoms as men. During the 1920s, the new ideal emerged for some women called the flapper. And the definition of a flapper is liberated young woman who embraced new fashions and urban attitudes of the day. So their style of dress: close-fitting felt hats, bright waistless dresses an inch above the knees, skin-toned stockings, sleek pumps, and strings of beads replaced the dark and prim ankle-length dress, whalebone corsets, and petticoats of the Victorian days. Young women clipped their hair into boyish bobs and dyed it jet black. Many women had become more assertive in their bid for equal status with men. Some began smoking cigarettes, drinking in public, and talking openly about sex. They danced the foxtrot, camel walk, tango, Charleston, and shimmy with reckless abandon. And their attitudes towards marriage changed as well. Many middle-class men and women began to view marriage as more of an equal partnership, kind of like today. Although both agreed that housework and child rearing remained a woman's job, that's still prim, as the book would say. It's primitive. So here are some pictures of flappers showing off their legs, which hadn't been seen in decades. Here are those short felt hats again. A new style of woman. You got them drinking. I believe this is from a movie, but those were the hairstyles. All right, double trouble. So magazines, newspapers, and advertisements promoted the image of the flapper, and young women and young people openly discussed courtship and relationships in ways that scandalized their elders. They were talking about dating. Although many young women donned the new outfits and ignored tradition, the flapper was more of an image of rebellious youth than a widespread reality. It did not reflect the attitudes and values of many young people. During the 1920s, morals also loosened, but only so far. Traditionalists in churches and schools protested this new casual dances and women's acceptance of smoking and drinking. So in the years before World War I, when men courted women, they pursued only women they intended to marry. In the 1920s, however, casual dating became increasingly accepted. Even so, a double standard, a set of principles granting greater sexual freedom to men than women, required women to observe stricter standards of behavior than men did. So even though women started, talking about their dating life more with their friends and in front of their family members, they were still held to a higher standard than boys. And if boys could do it, why couldn't women, you know? So, as a result of this double standard, many women were pulled back and forth between old standards and the new. Do I drink? Do I not drink? Am I going to be looked down upon? Why? It shouldn't matter. So, here you got the battle of the sexes, the double standard. Whew. Excuse me. So women changed. So the fast changing world of the 1920s produced new roles for women outside the home and trends in family life. A booming industrial economy opened up new work opportunities for women in offices, factories, stores, and other professions. This same economy churned out time saving appliances and products that reshaped the roles of housewives and mothers. And as we've learned, or we've relearned, women had worked successfully during the war. But after the war, employers who believed men had the responsibility to financially support their families were often replacing female workers. Women also continued to seek paid employment, but their opportunities changed. Not so much in factories, and like industrial jobs. So many female college graduates turned to the quote unquote women's professions and became teachers, nurses, and librarians. Big businesses required extensive correspondence and record keeping, so this also created a huge demand for clerical workers like typists, filing clerks, secretaries, stenographers, and office machine operators. Others would become clerks in stores or held jobs on the assembly lines, where unskilled labor was still needed. However, a handful of women broke the old stereotypes by doing work once reserved for men, such as flying airplanes, driving taxis, drilling oil wells, etc., etc. So here you have some college students, college graduates with their hat. And here's a teacher in the 1920s. And here are some clerical jobs. Okay, so more options for higher education also expanded women's roles in public life. Several women's colleges opened during the 1920s. You have Sarah Lawrence College and Scripps College, both were established in 1926. New community colleges or junior colleges made low cost, higher education available to more women with jobs or families. And by 1930, 10 million women were earning wages. However, few rose to managerial jobs, and wherever they worked, women were still paid less than men. So, fearing competition for their jobs, men argued that women were just temporary workers whose real job was at the home. And between 1900 and 1930, the patterns of discrimination and inequality for women in the business world were established. So that sense of it's a man's world, that paternalistic, women don't need to work here, like that thought that still is around today, started during this era. Because men weren't ready for change, and they weren't ready for women to be working with them and getting paid the same amount as them. They had to be paid less. They had to be discriminated against and quote unquote to be put into their place. And, the men were afraid. They were afraid. All right, so more changes. Widespread social and economic changes reshaped the family. Birth rates had been declining for several decades. That's how you can tell if a population is growing or expanding, you check out the birth rates. And if they're down, well, population isn't growing. And so they had been declining, and it dropped at a faster rate in the 1920s. Why? Is because there was a wider availability of birth control information. And that's what it's called, birth control. So Margaret Sanger first opened the first birth control clinic in 1916, founded the American Birth Control League in 1921, and fought for legal rights of physicians to give birth control information to their patients. At the same time, social and technological innovations simplified household labor and family life. Stores overflowed with ready-made clothes, sliced bread, and canned foods. Public agencies provide services for the elderly, public health clinics served the sick, and workers' compensation assisted those who could no longer work. These innovations and institutions had an effect of freeing homemakers from some of their traditional family responsibilities. Many middle-class housewives, the main shoppers and money managers of families, focused their attention on their homes, husbands, children, and pastime. That's Margaret Sanger. And that's sliced bread. It was a thing. So, Rebels, I believe this is also the last slide. It was very short one. As the spheres of activity and influence expanded, women experienced greater equality in marriage. Marriages were based increasingly on romantic love and companionship. Children were no longer thrown together with adults in factory work, farm labor, and apprenticeships. Instead, they spent most of their days at school and organized activities with others their own age. At the same time, parents began to rely more heavily on manuals of childcare and the advice of experts. Working class and college educated women quickly discovered the pressure of juggling work and family, but also the strain of working class women was more severe. As women adjusted to changing roles, some also struggled with rebellious adolescents who had put an unprecedented strain on families. Teens in the 1920s were studied and socialized with others and spent less time with their families. As the pressure intensified, some adolescents resisted parental control, much as the flappers resisted societal control. And this theme of adolescent rebelliousness can be seen much in the popular culture of the 1920s. The decade is known as the Roaring Twenties, was a celebration of youth culture, the way young people lived, their values, and their styles. Education and entertainment reflected the conflict between traditional attitudes and new modern ways of thinking. And there are some youth 1920s women. And that is it. That is complete. That is, I don't have the book number, the page number. Oh, passed it. Hold on. All right. Ooh, very short, very short, very short. All right. So you're going to do, oh, stop right there. Your homework is to do page, what is it, 390, 3 and 4. Very short. This was a very short video. It's a very short homework assignment, 2 questions. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this little brief overview of women during the 1920s. And yeah. Okay, if you guys did enjoy that, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.